Hi everybody, Neil Kravitz here. I hope you're enjoying these daily clinical pearls. I just got back a few hours ago on a red-eye flight from New Mexico. Always a pleasure speaking to the New Mexico Orthodontic Society. This is my second time there, and I always love seeing my great friends Brent and Greg Jurgensen. I just love the Jurgensen family. So I received a great question at the meeting that I'd like to talk about for this clinical pearl. I know I'm speaking a little bit fast, but there's a lot to unravel here. And the question was, how do I address a unilateral substitution? So remember the rule of two that I call. The upper twos usually have a dental anomaly 2% of the time, and it's often bilateral. That's the rule of twos that I like to teach. And what I mean by that is the upper lateral incisors usually have a missing lateral, and that missing lateral, which happens about 2% of the time, is often associated with a bilateral, missing lateral, or peg lateral incisor. So the other side is either peg or missing as well. So it's very easy if you have a missing lateral on one side and a peg on the other side to just take that peg out and to do a bilateral canine substitution. That's always going to be an orthodontist preference. It is far trickier if the lateral incisor on the other side is not significantly undersized. If you have a good looking lateral, if it's just a little bit smaller, well, what do? Do you do a unilateral substitution on one side? Do you take out a good looking lateral on the other side? I prefer not to take out a good looking lateral. I love taking out a peg and keeping it bilaterally symmetrical. But if it's a relatively good sized lateral incisor, I then have to make the decision, do I do a unilateral substitution or do I take out a first premolar on the other side? And it really depends on the malocclusion. If it's class 2, I'm going to do a unilateral sub on one side and take out the upper left 4 on the other side to reduce the overjet. If it's class 1, boy, we have to decide, do we want to just do heavy class 3 elastics on one side? Okay, so my preference is always to take out the peg and to do a bilateral substitution. If I have a good sized lateral, I will take out the first premolar. Now, if there is crowding in the lower arch, now it gets a little bit more complicated. What are we going to do? If it's mild crowding in the lower arch, I may do a substitution on one side and then 3 second premolars, 1 in each quadrant, in the remaining 3 quadrants. If it's moderate to severely crowded in the lower arch, I'll do a substitution on one side and then 3 first premolars. So in summary, there's a lot here. I prefer symmetry. I prefer a bilateral substitution. So if there's a peg lateral on the other side, I'm going to take that peg out and do a bilateral canine substitution. If it's a good size lateral, I will do a unilateral substitution, or I will take out a maxillary first premolar on the opposite side, and that's really ideal when there's significant overjet. If there's a class 1 malocclusion with a unilateral sub missing on just one side, and there's a lot of crowding in the lower arch, depending on the crowding, I will either take out 3 first premolars or 3 second premolars. I will take out the second premolars if the crowding's more mild. Oof, I hope you enjoyed this clinical pearl. There's a lot of information here. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to this page. Thank you for supporting the JCO.